Hello, it's April 18th and this is the New Arab Weekly podcast from the New Arab in London. Each week we look at the biggest stories from the week and ask what happened and what does it all mean. Joining us to unpack the last 7 days in the Middle East, we have Head of News Paul McLoughlin.
Hello.
And journalist and reporter Rosabel Crean.
Hello.
The last 7 days were, to put it lightly, busy. So let's crack on. There's only really one place to start, and that's with you, Paul.
Early Sunday morning, Iran unleashed a barrage of missiles and drones on Israel after the killing of an IRGC commander at the Damascus consulate on the 1st of April. The projectiles were mostly intercepted by Israeli and Arab forces, with only a limited number making their way through the air defences. 4 rockets hit the Nevatim base in the Negev desert, reportedly the primary target of the Iranian salvo. Israel's Western allies have urged calm, but they know Israel is a difficult partner to restrain.
This is an Israeli decision to make, whether and how they'll respond to what Iran did on Saturday, and we're going to leave it squarely with them.
Their decision to make, but are you making suggestions?
We are not involved in their decision-making process about a potential response.
After the killing of Brigadier General Mohammad Reza Zahedi, Iran had made threats for retaliation for weeks. There had been some scepticism amongst Western commentators about whether Iran would respond, but the US and Western allies had been warning for weeks that there was going to be a response from Iran. There was a lot of shuttle diplomacy during the time, and that kind of gave the indication that something was due. On Saturday night or Sunday morning, depending where you were, Iran sent a message to the Swiss embassy and said that they were going to launch a retaliatory attack. Then they fired the missiles, which was 120 ballistic missiles, 30 cruise missiles, and 170 drones. The IRGC made some warnings about the strike, and also other kind of Iranian government outlets, which gave Israel and surprisingly some of its Arab allies time to prepare. And they successfully managed to down most of the missiles and drones which headed towards Israel. Iran had also said that they were only going to target military facilities and not civilian targets, which again probably decreased the tensions during this attack.
And why did they tell everybody? I mean, that sort of defeats the object, doesn't it? Or does it?
This probably brings us to 3 reasons why the attack took place to begin with. So one theory is that Iran wanted to basically hit Israel as hard as it could, hence the large number of rockets and missiles which were fired. I think we can probably discount that because he wanted to give a warning otherwise. The second theory is that it was coordinated and all for show, and it was basically for a domestic audience and for Iran's allies in the region. As you probably know, the Iranian kind of regime is very security conscious. And once Zahedi was killed on the effectively Iranian soil because it was a diplomatic mission, this was a big blow to their kind of image at home, that they are kind of like masters of the game of kind of geopolitical military maneuvers and diplomatic kind of maneuvers. Yeah. So they had to go and show that they will retaliate when they're hit, especially such a big target like Zahedi. The third theory, which is a lot of Arabic-speaking commentators have put forward, is that this was Iran's chance to go and test Israeli air defences in anticipation or, suggesting that a future strike by Iran could be on the cards. One of the interesting things is they targeted, a few of the rockets which actually did make their way through the Israeli air defences and Arab air defences was the Nevatim air base in the Negev, which was apparently the launch pad for the attack which killed Reza Zahedi. So that, of course, had some symbolic kind of, it was a symbolic victory in some ways for the Iranians that they managed to hit the base, even if it was only minor damage.
Makes sense to target, that they would target that.
Exactly. And there was it was limited, the kind of, the human impact. So, I think all parties there could claim a victory.
I mean, I think it's pretty worth... How many did they launch? Over 300? About 300 or so?
It was about 350. The Americans said 500, I think, which may be including the proxies. But yeah, 350, around about 350 missiles and drones.
Trust the Americans to overestimate.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty worth remembering that although I think they had over 99% interception rate of these drones and missiles, Iranian drones have been proven in the field, because it's the Iranian drones that have been used by Russia to attack Kiev and other Ukrainian cities, which have been successful. Some have been shot down, but others have been successful.
Yeah,
these aren't paper planes.
They're not, but I mean, I think there was a Shahed which the Russians used from Iran, and they did have a big impact. We saw like Kiev being hit again. And it probably shows like the kind of strength of the Israeli air defences and also the cooperation of Arab states in this, notably Jordan, and the kind of impact that can have. Of course, Ukraine has also used this. President Zelensky said that he wants to kind of support, which the West showed there. So not only Arab partners, but also the UK, US, France were also involved in helping down these. Zelensky has actually said that this is proof that Ukraine needs more support, particularly in regards to air defences and air support from the West, from its Western partners.
Yeah.
And considering that considering that 99% of the missiles and drones were intercepted, it's still very much being kind of labelled as an attack on Israeli soil. I wondered what do we know about the Israeli public's reaction? I mean, they all got woken up by air raid sirens on Saturday night, and I imagine had pretty sleepless nights. Are they quite belligerent? Are they looking to respond? Are they backing that?
I mean, I don't think this attack, due to the kind of the warning and the obvious dimensions of like kind of de-escalation to an extent from Iran in the way it was done, it wasn't exactly like the Iraq attacks in 1991 during the Gulf War, which did, I think, generate a lot more panic, and there was more deaths and kind of injuries. So I wouldn't say it's on that scale. And also the fact that Iran also said that they were targeting the military and not civilian, not cities, for example, which did happen in 91 with the Scud missiles, also was, a sign that there wasn't the level of panic that we saw back then. I think that the response has been kind of like, I'm not like a close follower of like, I don't have a lot of, couldn't say I have a lot of friends in Israel, but from what I've seen in kind of Israeli media is that, there was kind of a lot of relief that the Israeli air defences did kind of intercept so many drones and rockets.
Cost them $1 billion though, that defence.
Yeah, that is extraordinary.
I mean, that is madness. Cost them $1 billion,
and cost Iran much less.
Yeah,
that's what they're saying.
One figure I read was they reckon it cost them about 1/10 of that.
This is
100, just 100 million. That's all, just a cool 100 million. But you think, I mean, it does make you think that Iran could probably afford to do that a few times. How many nights, say, could Israel put up $1 billion?
Well, this is the thing. Like, for Israel, it was kind of an expensive, obviously, project, but it was also kind of invaluable for the government to show that they can defend the citizens despite this.
The alternative would have been much worse, right?
Exactly. But they definitely had, there was, I'm sure most of the Israeli public are also kind of conscious of the fact that they were given warning. If they hadn't been given a warning, if Jordan, for example, hadn't been involved, or France and Britain didn't have time to bring in ships and interceptors, would they have had the same kind of success? Yeah. Probably not. So that will probably be likely on the minds of most Israelis that, this could be, a lot more bloody and a lot more kind of, devastating, the impact if Israel, first of all, so if Iran, first of all, doesn't give warning and also it fires a lot more rockets. It's got about at least 3,000 intercontinental missiles, I think. There's got a limited number of launches, that's the only thing, probably around about the number which was fired, from what I understand. So, but if they did this on a daily basis, like you said, we've seen with Saudi Arabia, this does cause enormous kind of, like with the Houthi rocket attacks, this does actually cause a lot of instability, even in some of the most stable countries. So Iran is likely aware of this. Again, this is a kind of a win for them. They can show, look, this is what we can do on a daily basis if you continue.
Should we be surprised that Jordan sort of stepped up to protect Israel?
I think we could. There's many different ideas behind this. Obviously, there was a lot of surprise that they did go to this extent of intervention. And there's obviously a lot of unhappiness with this too, particularly with what's happening in Gaza. I mean, I think it's...
Which the Jordanian public have been incredibly vocal about.
Exactly. But I think that, the fact is that this isn't about Gaza for Iran, this missile attack. This missile attack is about national prestige. And one of the kind of IRGC commanders being killed on effectively Iranian soil. So this wasn't directly about Gaza. So I think there is that element which kind of, again, diffuses criticism of the Jordanian government. But, the Jordanian government is also very security conscious. It's always, we've seen during the Syria war, they've taken the issues of national borders very seriously. And they've closed the borders with Syria when there was an attack by ISIS or jihadist militants on border guards there. So, there's many reasons for the kind of Jordanian kind of government's focus on security and sensitivities around security. But I think, this is what the government would say probably, that this is our airspace and no one has the right to fire missiles and rockets over that.
Yeah.
The response from the Jordanian public might be very different though, as you said.
Yeah, we saw the Jordanian King Abdullah, he said that they wouldn't be dragged into the theatre of war earlier this week after such allegations and questioning of why they decided to intervene. And as you say, they were just protecting their own airspace is what Abdullah said.
Jordan as well in recent years with the Netanyahu government, they've had many difficulties too. It's not been as smooth sailing as it has been in the past. But of course, Jordan also doesn't have great relations with Iran either. And they will not, again, from the Jordanian government's point of view, they probably will not want there to become like a proxy kind of theatre for a conflict between Israel and Iran. So I think that was kind of the message perhaps they wanted to send. But of course, there has been anger about the lack of solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza from the Jordanian government.
And speaking of Gaza, obviously, over the months of their brutal onslaught in Gaza, Israel has lost a lot of sympathy. Since the attack on October 7th, they have lost a lot of sympathy. It would seem that with this attack, they have garnered now quite a lot of sympathy from the international community who were drifting away and now back on side. Do we think that, there's always talk about now that Israel really seems to want to counterattack. How and when and where? I mean, we could probably debate that all night. And probably only Benjamin Netanyahu and his cronies know. But do you think they could afford to give up that sympathy? I mean, considering operations in Gaza have not finished.
Yeah,
they can still point to that and say Hamas and Iran are the same thing. So we are now we have more, even greater, in their eyes, legitimacy to go after Hamas in Gaza.
Well, I mean, as the killing of Zahedi put pressure on the Iranian regime to respond, the security-conscious security regime to respond. The same could be said about the Israeli government now. Netanyahu has a lot of critics from the left and right, but particularly from the right, in the coalition government, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, people like that, who will want a kind of direct attack on on Iran. Sorry. The second option is probably what a lot more of the kind of centrist, centre-right Israeli kind of generals and politicians want, is an indirect attack on proxies, which would be Syria. But they've been doing this throughout the war. Yeah. There's been hundreds or thousands of strikes on Iranian proxies in Syria and Lebanon. And that, would not really send out much of a message. I'm guessing this is what the kind of right wing want. One of the interesting things is the similarities between this, how America's responded to this, with how they responded to Israel throughout the war. Biden told Netanyahu reportedly, take the win, i.e., don't respond. You've got kind of like you've got a winner here, and don't blow that up now. You've got sympathy behind you. So don't kind of mess this up now and by doing anything rash. Yeah. So I think that this would be kind of. So I think this would be for Israel it's a difficult one to claim. To kind of like predict, because as we've seen throughout the Gaza war, they don't really care. Israel doesn't, or at least the government does not care about his public relations image. With the level of devastation we've seen in Gaza, the whole, you could say pretty much like. The whole public, global public, I don't mean Western public here, global public has turned quite solidly against Israel. Yeah. So would they really care about, this is the perfect opportunity for launching an attack, which they've kind of been wanting to for many, many years on Iran's ballistic missiles program or nuclear program or anything else to give Iran a bloody nose. So I think a lot of the security kind of apparatus regime in Israel would want to use this as a chance now to go and strike Iran. I think the delay, for the delayed response would have meant that a lot of people would have thought that there might not be this direct response, the direct kind of strikes on Iran. But yesterday we saw some bad signs that there was going to be something when the German and when the British foreign ministers went to Israel to speak to Netanyahu, who the following day basically just said, no, we're going to go ahead. No one tells us what to do. And Cameron today made a statement which made it appear that an attack on Iran is imminent.
So the delay is not a dilute.
Well, I think I think a lot of security kind of analysts did think this was kind of like a good sign, the delay, but it could be also an indication that they're planning something big, and a big response would require a lot of preparation. So,
the Iranians, I believe, have already started evacuating people from their nuclear facilities and in the sort of surrounding areas of their nuclear facilities. So, I mean, that is an obvious target, I think.
And also the International Atomic Agency, Energy Agency is also kind of, I think, also withdrawn its kind of inspectors as well. And we've also seen like a lot more rhetoric from the Iranian leadership that they will retaliate, even harder if Iran is struck, which is kind of like a mirror of what has been said before the Iranian strike on Israel. So this, for those of us who probably want to avoid a major escalation in the region, then this is probably isn't the best of signs.
Watch this space. Rosabel, you have our second story today.
Palestinians in the occupied West Bank are reeling from a wave of violent attacks by Israeli settler groups which began last Friday and continued for 3 days. Hundreds of settlers stormed the Palestinian village of Al-Mukhayr, northeast of Ramallah, and set fire to cars, homes, and fired live ammunition. The mayor of the village said 1,500 people descended on the village in a 3-hour attack, which resulted in the death of one Palestinian man, 26-year-old Jihad Abu Alia. Cars were burnt, livestock was killed and mutilated. The Palestinian Red Crescent Emergency Services said they were blocked from attending the scene by Israeli forces who had blocked the road. Videos and footage taken by locals and journalists nearby showed groups of settlers chucking stones, burnt out cars, and really violent scenes. And so why did it happen? It was triggered after a 14-year-old Israeli settler boy who was grazing sheep went missing on Friday. He was found dead on Saturday by Israeli forces. It's not yet clear what happened to the boy, but Israeli authorities are describing it as a murder. Throughout that weekend, at least 10 villages were subject to separate settler attacks, all in the same sort of area around Ramallah. Cars were burnt. Palestinians' homes were set on fire, and sort of widespread intimidation. At least 49 houses were fully burnt down, 92 vehicles, including cars and trucks and farm vehicles. 14 people were critically injured. And these figures are from the Colonization and War Resistance Commission, which is a local non-profit that tracks these type of assaults against Palestinians. So one man, Abu Adnan Abu Alia from the village of Al-Mukhayr, which was subject to the largest attack, who was interviewed by AFP news agency, said this. The settlers surrounded the house of farmer Imad Abu Alia, who has 120 sheep, and threw firebombs. He took the sheep, he tried to escape, only to find himself chased by 20 of the settlers. They beat him and fractured his skull. He lost consciousness and is at the ICU in hospital now. And the settlers took the sheep with them. The mayor of Al-Mukhayr said it was the most violent attack the village had ever faced, but by no means the first.
Obviously, the killing of a 14-year-old boy is tragic. There's obviously a very strong argument to say he shouldn't have been there in the first place, being part of an illegal Israeli settlement, but tragic nonetheless. The violence that followed, also tragic, and also a continuation of, I think, a real dangerous and disturbing uptick in violence that we've seen in the West Bank since October 7th.
Exactly. Settler attacks have been going on for years, as you say, but they have come to their highest level in 2023, and which has surged since the beginning of the Gaza War in October. The UN has recorded more than 700 settler attacks between October and April, and also some kind of alarming developments in terms of the type of these attacks. We've heard reports of settlers putting on army uniforms, armed with rifles and carrying out these attacks. We also know that Israeli forces are often present during these incidents and do little to sort of intervene and are very much watching on. This is all being tracked and reported by not just UN agencies, but also Israeli human rights groups like Beit Salem. And it seems that settlers are enjoying a kind of newfound entitlement, confidence, however you want to describe it, which is very much being supported by figures in the Israeli government and senior ministers like Itamar Ben-Gvir, the national security minister.
So this isn't just... would it be fair to sort of describe these not as roaming gangs of violent settlers, but much more as sort of state-sponsored and state-directed roaming gangs of violent settlers?
Yeah, I think that is how some are describing it. That they are definitely sort of violent vigilante settler groups. Often armed with guns. And actually, we heard that at the beginning of the October War, Ben-Gvir, the national security minister, he handed out some 10,000 weapons to kind of these, what he described as like social society groups, civil society groups in the West Bank, including in East Jerusalem, essentially to protect against Palestinians. He's very much an anti-Arab person and has made
a racist and a fascist, I think, is
yeah, is actually a fact.
We had a story out today actually on the New Arab's website. Israel's Ben-Gvir forms police force targeting left-wing activists in West Bank. So as well as Palestinians, he's now targeting left-wing activists who express solidarity with Palestinians, according to a report that came out on Tuesday. Apparently the unit's formation came as a direct response to sanctions imposed by the United States and Europe against West Bank outposts and extremist settlists. I mean, this is incredibly sort of worrying development, I think. And I think it's going to have a real chilling effect on people who go to the West Bank and support Palestinians.
Yes.
Either through your marches or just meeting and talking to them and getting shown around and things like this. Yeah,
they're very much under threat as well from settlers who are clearly getting support from the government. And it's also, because of what's been happening in Gaza, it's essentially kind of shifted focus away from the West Bank. And so a lot of these attacks have been going on and are underreported. I think the scale of the attacks last weekend and the violence and the footage that was very quickly shared online and in local media did then get more global attention than we usually see. But essentially for Palestinians, it's about 2.5 million who live in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, are under constant kind of facing cycles of violence, like daily intimidation, whether it's stealing land from farmers, stealing sheep. The boy who went missing, the Israeli boy, he was from this outpost called Malakei Shalom, which was not far from Al Mukhaya, the village that was attacked. An outpost is basically an abandoned military building in the West Bank that Israeli settler groups then kind of take over, whether to use as a farm or for other purposes. There are about 128 outposts and 150 settlements. I mean, settlements are essentially towns. I think maybe describing them as settlements, although that's probably like a legal term is not as clear as one might imagine, but they're essentially, some of them are huge and very developed and much more prosperous than the neighbouring Palestinian villages. And it's been a kind of successive Israeli government policy for many years to expand Jewish movements into the West Bank.
Was this shepherded then from one of the kind of more wildcat settlements by quite, zealous and kind of militant settler groups who do occupy some of these, who are some of the most kind of like violent amongst the kind of settler movements in the occupied West Bank towards Palestinians?
Yeah, there's certainly different levels of extremism among the settlers, and there are some, and it is quite often usually the farmer types that take on quite aggressive confrontations with Palestinian farmers. And we know because essentially what happens is these shepherd settler communities, they've been growing in prominence, and they establish areas to graze their animals, and then they make claims that where the animals go, the kind of where the sheep reaches to, that becomes the border, even if it's Palestinian land. And then when that's disputed by the Palestinians, they then show up with force and the backing of the Israeli army.
I think also what's interesting, what you mentioned before, Hugo, was about Ben Gvir and this kind of militant group to target left-wing groups in the West Bank. I mean, this also shows, obviously Ben Gvir is a racist, and he, has showed,
a proud racist as well.
Yes, exactly. And it's showing, he's displayed very violent and racist rhetoric against Palestinians, but also another kind of key kind of target of him and the rest of the Israeli far right is left-wing Israelis activists who kind of have shown solidarity with Palestinians in the West Bank, who have been at checkpoints monitoring. I think this shows kind of just a level of kind of hatred which a lot of these kind of far-right Israeli figures have towards, not just towards Palestinians, but also other Jewish Israelis.
I mean, I think it sort of feeds into as well that intense desire by them to not be monitored. Like they know they want to do what they want to do, but they also know that they want to avoid scrutiny from the international community. So they don't get, like recently happened, they don't get put under sanctions. So you get rid of the people who are there showing solidarity. And
who's watching?
Who, let's be honest, frankly, are probably more likely to be listened to in the West than Palestinians in the West Bank will be. Get rid of them, so no one's monitoring, and they can do what they want and get away with impunity.
Yeah, and they do.
I mean, let's be honest, more impunity than they're already getting away.
Yeah, in terms of the attacks last weekend, we've seen no arrests and no response from Israeli authorities in regards to what happened and the individuals involved, which demonstrates the level of impunity that these groups are enjoying. I mean, since October, 100 acres of Palestinian land has been confiscated by settlers, according to an Israeli rights group, Beit Salem, which is one of the ones that will be being targeted. Actually, I wanted to touch upon as well the kind of a bit about the legal status of the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which the 700,000 settlers that are living there are considered illegally living there under international law, which is widely recognised by the international community. But Israel does dispute this. It says that West Bank land and East Jerusalem land was sort of never assigned to any sovereign country, and actually it's still disputed. And their line is very much that peace negotiations are the way forward to deal with this.
It's probably worth noting as well that those things that they want with peace negotiations, all these things were part of the Oslo Accord, which the Israelis have repeatedly broken and violated. So
they enjoy citing the UN when it suits them, but when it doesn't, they're very happy to ignore it as well.
We also had the partition plan at the start when Israel was created, which did establish a Palestinian state. So I don't see the kind of logic there from Israel that it wasn't assigned to a sovereign country.
If you've been looking for logic, Paul, you've come to the wrong place. Final story today comes from me. Intense rainfall has hit the Gulf this week, with one area of the UAE recording 9.7 inches of rain in less than 24 hours. The flooding across the UAE and Oman has caused widespread damage and left at least 20 dead, including 10 school children.
See the traffic in Sheikh Zayed Road just now is choco-blocked. I'm sure these people are not going to reach home today because there is so much of water here. See, this is
So the headlines here are that intense heavy rain hit across the Gulf, including the UAE, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and Qatar. By far the worst affected places were the UAE and Oman. There was a record downpour in the UAE. In the area of Al Ain, there was 254 millimetres, or 9.7 inches, in less than 24 hours. That's the most rain recorded since records began in 1949, which is also older than the country of the UAE. At least 19 people were killed in Oman. Tragically, there was a vehicle carrying 10 school children that was washed away. They were aged between 10 and 15. That happened in the Shakir province, which is about 115 kilometres south of the capital of Muscat. Across Oman and the UAE, and also to a lesser extent in Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, you've had roads closed, hundreds of flights have been delayed and cancelled. Social media has been, for want of a better word, flooded with pictures of cars stranded up to their roofs with water. Probably some context about whether this is a lot of rain or not. It is a lot of rain. On an average year, the UAE will receive between 140 and 200 millimetres of rain. Dubai as a city, about 97 millimetres of rain within a year. In April, the average monthly rainfall is about 8 millimetres of rain. So with 254 falling in less than 24 hours, we can see that this is a lot of rain. It was known that this was coming. This was not a surprise. A severe weather event was forecast. Some numbers for you. In Dubai, they had 442 millimetres of rain. The Dubai International Airport, second busiest airport in the world, 127 millimetres of rain. In Oman, they received 230 millimetres of rain between Sunday and Wednesday.
A lot of rain, as you say.
Yeah.
And how are Dubai's residents coping? What's everyone doing? Are sort of apartments being flooded, putting out sandbags?
So it seemed preparations were limited, frankly. I mean, I think one thing is worth saying, if we think about Dubai, we think about tall skyscrapers towering, and the flooding has really not affected anybody living on the 61st floor, which is good for them. There are a lot of people, though, in the UAE and in Dubai who don't live on the 61st floor, who do live in normal houses. They've obviously been quite severely affected. There was a resident of Al Waka in Dubai, Shahaz Ahmed. He told Al Arabiya English, quote, "Residents, including myself, have been severely affected by the flooding, particularly in our building located on the corner of the area. The inundation of the road saw the water breach our building, infiltrating critical areas such as the water pump room and the electrical room, leading to power outages." A lot of residents have been complaining about they basically now have no water, ironically, no electricity, gas. There's no place to prepare food, carry out basic, household tasks. It is quite serious. And obviously there's a huge amount of damage as well that comes, when there's flooding. The insurance claims are going to be through the roof across the UAE, but maybe there's not going to be as many claims as there should be, because the idea of home insurance is still not widely followed in the UAE.
Not mainstream.
It's not mainstream. So there's going to be a lot of people out there who essentially, or maybe they'll have some home insurance, but essentially they do not have home insurance for flooding because, you live in a desert, so who needs insurance for flooding? Well,
yeah, and it hasn't aged well. The Dubai government and media office, their X account, they put out a post on Monday titled "Snaps of Dubai's rainy weather" with some kind of scenic shots of the rain and cars splashing into it, which I imagine was sort of hours before the actual proper downfall came. It hasn't aged well.
It's not aged well at all. It's quite poor taste now, actually, really, isn't it?
And we've also seen quite a lot of disruption at Dubai airport, which was flooded. How is this? What effect do you think this will have on the kind of tourism industry in Dubai? And are we seeing a lot of travellers stranded?
We've seen a lot of travellers stranded. A lot of them have been talking to international outlets and complaining. So on Wednesday, there are about 300 flights to and from Dubai International Airport were cancelled. It's worth noting, not all of them would have been staying in Dubai because it's a huge sort of transit hub for the rest of the world. Hundreds more were delayed. There was one woman, Anne Wing from Rotherham, South Yorkshire. She told the BBC, "We have spoken to no one from Emirates since 8 o'clock this morning. Passengers were seen shouting and rioting at the connection desk. There were no staff to be seen." Another couple, Kate and Andrew Golding, they told the BBC they'd been there for 12 hours. They said, quote, "It has been worse, I think, than anyone expected. But the system within the airport has completely fallen apart. And Emirates, which I consider to be one of the finest airlines, no staff, no information, no coordination, no professionalism, no care, no disaster planning at Emirates. It's weird. Big companies normally plan for these events. It's been total chaos." This is obviously, I don't know if Kate and Andrew Golding are going to be booking a repeat trip to Dubai. Maybe not. In terms of like the actual tourism, I think, Dubai will recover from this. They, of all people, have the money to recover from this. So I think in the long run, it will be fine. There's going to be a lot of damage, but give it a couple of months. I'm sure less. Give it, I would say, weeks, and all those tourists are going to be flooding back. Everything else, as I said before, a lot of the things that they want to do take place high above the waterline.
Yeah.
In ridiculously tall skyscrapers. So
people have blamed actually the architecture of Dubai in terms of those skyscrapers, the glass, the metal buildings, as one of the reasons why the flooding was so particularly bad, because it wasn't able to absorb, or there was no drains.
It runs off.
Just runs off.
The same in Oman as well. I lived in Muscat, and you have like mountains at the side of like wadis surrounding Muscat, and when heavy kind of rains come in, and it's very flat in Muscat itself, you have basically just nowhere for the water to go. If it can't go into the sea, then it's going to be trapped in streets. And many times I was there, the roads were flooded. I was there for a major cyclone called Goni, which caused quite a lot of damage, and saw islands and villages kind of evacuated. And just before I arrived in Oman, there was actually a huge one called Goni, which people still talk about today. And I'm sure people will still be talking about this storm for many years to come.
Probably. The president of the UAE, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, has ordered an urgent review of the country's infrastructure.
Have the government said anything in terms of a clean-up operation?
No.
Compensation?
No. I mean, I think we are. So one thing, more rain is forecast. So we're not actually out of this yet. I think in time, I'm sure they will try and come up with something. And I think, there's been a lot of people, go on social media if you want to smile. You'll see a lot of good videos, a lot of people helping out and trying to help other people. There's an excellent video I'd encourage you to watch of a cat being rescued, and it was very heartwarming to see.
I saw that.
You saw that? Yeah, it was very heartwarming.
It was heartwarming.
It was very heartwarming. So people are out there and they are trying to help. I think there is more rain to come, apparently, according to forecasts. And I think in time the government will probably do something. I think the question will be is who's getting the help? Will it be the people who need it most, or is it going to be buying extra big mops for the marble floors of hotel lobbies? I don't know. We'll wait and see on that.
Some people have suggested that a strange phenomenon, or not even phenomenon, like scientific mechanism called cloud seeding might have been responsible for the floods. Are you able to elaborate about that?
Yeah, it wasn't that. Well, so the UAE does do cloud seeding, right? It's been doing it since the 90s. If I put my science hat on, cloud seeding is, in a cloud, you need to form water droplets for it to then rain. With cloud seeding, they fly up and then they fill the clouds with particles, not water, other things, which then mean the moisture and the water vapor can cling to the particles and essentially create a bed for raindrops to then fall. So it's not filling them with water, because these are to solve water shortages, so that would just be a waste anyway. They might as well keep it on the ground. They pump particles into the clouds, which then the water vapor can attach to then create drops of water.
It's completely like something from a sci-fi film.
I mean, so I did see something that says cloud seeding is still controversial in the weather community because it's been hard to prove that it does very much. So a lot of countries do it. A lot of countries around the world do it.
Okay, beyond the sort of Gulf area.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think most famously it was done in China. China does it a lot for trying to get clouds to rain on agricultural fields and things. And they also did it before the 2008 Beijing Olympics to make sure their Olympics wasn't rained on. They did cloud seeding then.
I guess we definitely don't need it in the UK.
No, we don't need it in the UK. But there was suggestion that cloud seeding was done ahead of this flooding, and this is what caused the flooding. Right. The UAE's National Centre for Meteorology said on Wednesday that cloud seeding took place on Sunday and Monday before the flooding and before the rains, but not on Tuesday when it did start raining, which doesn't sound great. But a number of experts have come out and said essentially nobody could cloud seed to such a level that it would then cause that level of flooding. It probably had no impact at all, really.
Okay.
You couldn't cloud seed that much.
Unprecedented level is everyone's favourite word.
Unprecedented levels, exactly. Professor Giles Harrison, Professor of Atmospheric Physics at the University of Reading, he said, quote, "There is such a fundamental mismatch of scale in the processes involved that I can't see how the rainfall and cloud seeding could be related. There would also be no reason to attempt cloud seeding in these circumstances, given the advanced forecast for heavy rain." I mean, the depressing answer to all of this, as to essentially why this has happened, is climate change. It's not cloud seeding, it's climate change.
Yeah.
Climate changes makes more extreme weather events happen. That's what's happened in the UAE. Okay, a few other stories before we go from the New Arab's website. First one here, President Abbas rejects Biden's request to halt UN vote on Palestinian membership. The UN Security Council is expected to vote on a draft resolution on Thursday. That's today. Currently, Palestine has observer status, but full member status would amount to the UN recognising Palestine as a state. Is this, do we think, actually a legitimate chance for state recognition? Or is this a bit of a pipe dream of President Abbas and the Palestinian Authority?
I mean, the UN has been kind of the best route for the Palestinians so far in this kind of route for recognition. As we've talked about before, kind of the peace process has ground to a halt, and there is no chance under Netanyahu and this government of Israel kind of recognising the Palestinian state. So I would say the UN is a good kind of mechanism for putting pressure on Israel to kind of, get back onto the negotiating table. This is what some people say.
Yeah, I think the US is pretty much expected to block the vote, though. So I don't think it's looking that positive, and it's not the first time this issue has come to the UN Security Council.
Yeah. UN's Libya envoy resigns, citing no hope for political progress. Unfortunately, more bad news for Libya. The UN's Special Envoy for Libya said Tuesday he attended his resignation, saying the world body could not successfully support the country's political transition as its leaders had put their own interests above finding a solution. Do we think, I mean, there was a time not that long ago that Libya was actually looking quite hopeful and they might achieve something there and get a government going. Do we think now, with all eyes of the world on Gaza and half an eye or so on Iran, that they're just sort of using this now as a chance to extract greater concessions and delay everything?
I mean, yeah, this is the kind of worry, is that, as you mentioned, kind of conflicts will reignite whilst the world is watching Gaza. I mean, we've seen in Sudan, there's been kind of more fighting, and, it's been, a lot of people have criticised media for not giving that the attention it deserves. So that will obviously be a big fear in Libya as well. The other kind of, what that might also hinge on is like the involvement of outside powers such as Turkey, Russia, France. And, I don't think Russia's in a position where it'd want to kind of be involved in, whether directly or indirectly in another conflict when it's kind of bogged down in Ukraine. France also has got its own kind of issues in Central Africa and the Sahel and obviously with Ukraine. So, yeah, I'm not going to make a prediction on this one, but hopefully it'll all pass smoothly.
Final story. Amnesty says US-led coalition not doing enough to address torture in Syrian camps. Amnesty International, the senior advisor on gender conflict and international justice at the organisation, said that the group have found patterns of systematic torture and coercion which the US has been involved in. I mean, these prisoners have been there for years now. Is there any solution to get these out?
It's important to note that, obviously there's not been a judicial process, so we can't actually say whether their involvement with the Islamic State. Even these people, a lot of them are just kind of families who've been, children who've lived there since Baghouz fell and all this. So obviously a lot of it falls when it comes to the foreign nationals being held there. The West in particular has kind of a responsibility to repatriate their citizens, and which is failing. And of course, that's not just to say also for them to be kind of go through a judicial process at home. But it just shows the kind of limbo of particularly for children being stuck in a camp like this with no facilities, it's effectively a prison, and these children obviously have done nothing wrong. So it's a very sad thing. And it also brings up the other issue, which is, the role of the SDF in kind of torture and detentions and disappearances, which has been quite underreported, really. Obviously, it's not on the scale of the Syrian regime or the Islamic State, but they have also been responsible for their own human rights abuses.
Yeah. Some good stuff on the New Arab's website this week. I picked out one from the analysis desk, kill zones. For Israel, there are no innocents in Gaza. Israel has reportedly created kill zones in Gaza that fail to distinguish between combatants and civilians, a stark violation of the laws of war, writes Jessica Buxbaum. Rosabel.
Keeping with the news theme of settler violence in the West Bank, I picked out a features piece by the New Arab contributor Philippe Parnot titled Under Siege, Life in the Shadow of Israeli Settler Violence in Masafer Yatta. The writer's been to the village and is profiling the farmers there who have suffered cycles of violence by Israeli settlers and the government. And so, check that piece out.
Excellent. And Paul?
Okay, I'm picking out from the Opinion Desk, which is the 1946 Anglo-American Committee and the Missed Opportunity for a Democratic Palestine by Laurie Allen. I would definitely recommend a read of this.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the New Arab Weekly. This week we were joined by Head of News Paul McLoughlin and journalist and reporter Rosabel Crean. We'll be back next week and every Friday after that. Our other podcast, The New Arab Voice, there was no episode this week, so if you're looking for that, it's not there. But we will be back next week with a new episode on Wednesday. You can subscribe to The New Arab Voice and this podcast, The New Arab Weekly, on Apple and Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts, and be notified when a new episode drops. Until then, if you have any questions for us or stories that you would like us to cover, drop us an email, podcast@newarab.com, or find us on social media at TNA Podcasts for the latest news. You can subscribe to the show so you never miss an episode, and you can also rate and review, which helps us spread the word. Don't forget to follow The New Arab on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram for all the latest news, analysis and opinion from the region.